Please subscribe Raj Shamani Clips channel if you want to become a better leader for tomorrow and achieve your Indian dream in short amount of time with just small clips. There's a new guy in the town, just everybody, he's becoming the poster boy for men around the world and toughen up, Andrew Tate. What's your view on him?
There are many things that he says that I agree with. I was actually saying it a long time ago, but it's not where I want it to be positioned. But I do agree with a lot of what he says. It just depends on which part you're referring to. Again, he's become a controversial figure. Again, he's just another example of a person who is speaking things that people wouldn't dare speak. And I think, again, before we get emotional about what he's saying, we really need to objectively assess it. I definitely think that there is some facts in what he's saying. But it just depends. He says a lot of things about a lot of things. But I do feel that, if you look in the Western world, the feminism movement is big. What has it resulted in? Has it really resulted in better new families? Has it resulted in better birth rate, reduced divorce rate? Has it resulted in more financial independence? Has it resulted in women being happy and fulfilled? I'm not convinced that it did what women thought it would do. And so I have views on it. I'm not a traditionalist in any way. I've grown up in a feminist society. But lately, as I'm getting older and I'm looking and I'm objectively assessing the impact of the feminism movement, some of my views are becoming a little bit more traditional now. And I'm starting to see the merits in that traditional family unit, where men serve different functions and women serve different functions. And I know just saying this will risk me being labeled as a misogynist. But it's not about that. It's not saying that men and women are not equal. It's about saying that men and women are not the same. And because of that, we do things differently, and we're meant to carry out different functions. And when that comes together, I think society has a higher chance of thriving. There is a case to say that in many Western countries, the birth rate is declining, because a lot of the chemistry and attraction between the genders happens through that polarity. And so if you remove that polarity, where men are becoming more like women and women are becoming more like men, the attraction automatically diminishes. Diminished physical attraction between the genders automatically results in a declining birth rate. A declining birth rate makes a nation weak. So there is, I know this is a very simplistic explanation and you can dive deep into it, but there is something here that would suggest that, the feminist movement definitely has some issues. And I don't know when it went from being pro-women to anti-men. And that's another issue in itself. It's like pendulum was probably needed to go this way, but it's gone so far this way now that all of a sudden it's gone from being pro-women to anti-men. And I don't know when that happened. And it's like, that's dangerous, because now you're making men feel like we need to be feminine and we can't even serve our primitive nature of being men and our instincts of building and conquering and advancing and protecting and defending, because now you're making us feel like we're aggressive, right? So there is that case as well. And it's about, obviously you want to be a civilized and emotionally intelligent human being and a man, but at the same time you have to be very careful not to give up your masculinity, because that's what makes you a man. And at the same time, it's what makes you attractive to the same women who are criticizing men. So I think it's a very careful balance. It's a very nuanced concept. I certainly would not claim to be an expert on it, but I do have strong views on it.
But do you believe that a lot of around the world, the movement and everything, okay, I'm not an expert on this, and I believe like men definitely needs to be better feelers. Men need to learn how to feel better, because I've been surrounded by women and strong women around my life. My mother, my sister, my aunts, like everybody's like that. So obviously not an expert. I don't understand the feminism movement as of yet, because I've not studied it enough. So not an opinion, it's just a question, right? I was recently traveling and I met a couple of people there, and somebody asked me a very interesting question. I want to ask you that as well. Do you believe that the modern media is somewhat trying to make men think that they should not be the way they are right now? or they're trying to make them weak, or they're trying to make them sensitive, or they're trying to make them, I don't know, whatever the word is. Somebody asked me this question. Like
feminizing men.
Feminizing men. Let's just talk about that.
I would say yes.
The modern media is doing that?
100%.
But what's the harm in that?
Well,
I'm just questioning beliefs. Yeah.
Great question. What's the harm in men being more feminine? I think we need to ask women, first of all, do they want more feminine men? They may like them, but how do they respond to them? That's the first thing. Second thing, if a building's burning, right, and there is people stuck in there, would we expect women to run in there to rescue? We wouldn't. We would expect men to run in there and risk their lives. That's the expectation that society has. The expectation is that women should run out screaming, and nobody's going to say that you're a coward, because that's the true feminine. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Run, preserve themselves and their families. But if a man does that, he's going to be ridiculed. There's an expectation that he should have gone in rather than run out. By default, there is an expectation on men, and I think it's a rightful expectation, that we have to act with honor. We can't just be about self-preservation. We have to build. We have to think intergenerationally. We've got to think about long-term. That requires risk. That requires a level of aggression. Do you really expect that feminine men who don't believe in these concepts of honor and masculinity and protecting and defending and creating and building are going to run into that building? I don't believe they will. And that's the problem. Now imagine your country is being invaded, or your house is being invaded. Do you really want a bunch of women to come and fight off the offenders? Or would you want the most masculine, rugged, dangerous men to defend you? You see, there's a saying that, good people can sleep comfortably in their beds because a lot of bad people out there are protecting their freedoms. There is a case for aggression. It has to be controlled aggression. I think what we had, the masculine man of the 60s and 70s, is not the answer either, because they were low on emotional intelligence. But what we perceived was that let's give up all the masculinity to fix those men. That's not the solution.
Yeah.
The solution is let's maintain those positive elements of masculinity and complement them with spiritual awareness and emotional intelligence, but not to give them up. I'm a man. I'm proud of being a man. I behave like a man. I think like a man. And I will never change that for anybody. And I have zero shame in it. And if society tries to make me feel like I'm aggressive for it, I'm rejecting that message. Because I know my daughter, my wife, the women in my life expect me to be a man, stand up, protect and defend when the time comes. And I need to fulfill my responsibility. Men think differently. That's a fact. And we can also logically say it doesn't work, but we also have to be mindful of biology. Biology doesn't care about logic or intellect. Biology is biology. What women may want and what they respond to physically sometimes are not the same things. And so even from an attraction point of view, women need a man that they look up as a leader. I'm not saying that the man should control her and suppress her and dominate her, but they do want a man who is dominant about his career aspirations. Right? So there is a case to say that there is some level of dominance that is good. I mean, at the end of the day, you can get too domesticated, and that's a risk to a man. As a man who has been brought up in a very civilized society, a very well-functioning society, a society that has rules for everything, how do I maintain some of my wild instincts? Right? You don't go to the zoo to see a dog. You go to the zoo and line up to see the most dangerous animal, because it fascinates you, it intrigues you at what it can do. And I think I love the words of Jordan Peterson. He said, a good man is a strong man who has the capacity for violence but chooses not to use it, rather than a man who hasn't got the capacity to violence, because then he's just weak. So we want to make sure that we can maintain that level of aggression and that level of dominance drive, but we use it sparingly and appropriately as and when it's needed, and not to use it on people who need our support, and not to inflict that upon people that may be physically or mentally and emotionally weaker than us. That's the critical point that we forgot to tell the men. And I think the narrative is completely distorted now. So I do feel that culture and media are working collectively to feminize men. I don't think it's good for men. I certainly don't think it's good for women.
Interesting. Because I believe in this, that I think as a man, you should understand women in your life. You should understand the feminine energy. You should embrace that, but not lose your masculinity as well, right? A lot of this, the conversation, as you rightly said, it's gotten to the extreme. Like, be masculine, but don't be toxic. Like, don't get into toxic masculinity, right? Because that's bad. Like, be super masculine, be happy. I am a man, I believe in this. I have certain traits of aggression and everything of that sort. But at the same time, I am self-aware enough about the other gender in my life, and I feel what they're feeling. I understand what they're understanding. I try to understand them and try to understand their logics and where they're coming from and their comfort zone as well. So I think every man needs to learn that as well. So it's a balance. We don't need to be feminine, but we don't need to be extremely toxic as a man as well, because the whole conversation is going on like on a two different notes on a lot of media as well.
And look, there's toxic femininity as well. There is that version as well. And we have to be careful, though, not to label strong men and assertive men as toxic.
We have to be careful, right? For sure. Strong men means very different than toxic masculine. I believe everybody should strive to become strong men.
Yes,
everybody,
and society needs them.
Yeah.
I believe that the spiritual order was, you have God. Men were supposed to submit their authority to God. That's how you gain wisdom and you gain compassion and you gain courage. If a man submits his authority to God, that means he's a wise leader, he's a compassionate leader. There was an expectation that women would then submit their authority to the man, and then children would submit their authority to the women. That was the social order for most of humanity, and we tampered with it. And we thought the social order is outdated, and so we should start to tamper with it. And now we have women living with cats and dogs, and the cat is the child and the ultimate authority, and then comes the woman, and there is no man and there's no God. And we yet to see the implications of this messing with this particular order. The issue also happened in some cultures where women were exploited because women were expected to give up their authority for men who had not given up their authority for God. That created an issue, because a man who hasn't got a sovereign moral authority to look up to then becomes God himself. And the problem with that is that man is very likely to use that to exploit others. So we placed expectations in certain cultures and societies that women should submit their authority to men, but we didn't place the obligation for men to become wise and spiritual and bold and all the qualities that are synonymous with being spiritual. So that was unfair. And so then the feminist movement was in response to that. But we fixed it the wrong way. What we should have done is to place the obligation on men to, hey, you get your act together, you need to be more responsible, you need to look after the family, you need to stop watching porn, you need to stop watching sports, you need to get your financial house in order, you need to build. That's your duty. We didn't do that. We attacked the women for wanting to submit to. So I understand why women got so upset, and women was like, I've had enough, I need my independence. Reality is most women would much rather be in the security and comfort of a man who protects her, but they don't have a choice anymore because men were not trained properly.
Thank you for watching this till the end. If you want to become a better leader for tomorrow, then subscribe our channel for more such clips.